Hey guys, welcome back. So I have done this case with the absolute intent to give you, the audience, something that you can relate to. I've heard your stories. I know some of you have been through a very similar situation to that of the victim, Amie Harwick, and I just want to go over Amie's story today. Amie Harwick was based out of California, here where I live, out in Los Angeles, which is about 4 hours away. Amie Harwick was a sex therapist. She was an author, she was a friend, she was a daughter. Everybody that came to know Amie really came to love and cherish Amie. She was well on her way to helping people and changing many lives. She was beautiful, she was smart. She ended up in a relationship that was very toxic and it turned into DV, and she made her way out of that relationship. And so the unfortunate thing is her ex-lover could not and literally refused to let go. She is said to have been thrown off the balcony of her third-story building home out in Los Angeles. This is literally every single person's biggest fear when it comes to having a crazy ex. If you've been there, then this one's for you, because you know. This case is based back in 2020, but there's actually a trial going on right now. And so I wanted to get on here, cover the story for you, allow you to get to know Amie. Feel free to tell your own stories in the comment section down below and just give a lot of love and support to those that knew Amie, and bring awareness as to how we can maybe avoid getting into a situation like Amie's. I'm Chelsea J. If you're new here, welcome. I can be found on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and of course, every Friday here with my favorite YouTube fam, you. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and as far as the video, if you end up loving it, please be sure to like it. Before we go any further, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Ana Luisa. With Ana Luisa, I've 100% felt restored and attractive with my gorgeous jewelry pieces. Ana Luisa elevates your everyday. They offer long-lasting, tarnish-resistant jewelry to meet and fit your everyday needs. 100% of their pieces are strength and humidity tested. And I also have a horrible allergy issue with cheap jewelry. So when I want to look elegant, it's hard for me to be able to just go off, blow the money, and afford something that looks elegant but wears into my body very cheaply. I can't have that. My ears will literally swell. They will get infected. And there is nothing worse than having a necklace bust, fall, break. I cannot tell you how many times this has happened to me, where I've bought something that looks like it's supposed to be worthy, and it's just not. Their designs are literally very affordable, just starting around $39. Trust me, they offer free shipping in and out of the US. I'm telling you. And I know how it feels to get ripped off. I am the first person to know what it's like to be gypped. Ana Luisa is not out for your dollar. They're out for your best interest. They guarantee 2-year warranty, you're unhappy with the item, reimbursement, or they replace it. I'm not even a person to really sport gold. This is so beautiful, guys. I don't even take it off. I just literally wear it everywhere because I'm so in love with it. So rather sit here and brag about my happiness with the new product, I'll do you one better. You get 20% off, my dear. Just use ChelseaJ20 for the code. I'm gonna leave the link down below. Now, Amie Harwick died in February of 2020. She was an author, she was a writer, she was a sex therapist. This woman was amongst one of the many powerful women out in Hollywood, and she set her sights out to really help people and change lives. In my opinion, that is the perfect place to go. She worked with a lot of people from the adult industry, and while you can actually have status to your name, you can be somebody that has a good title and all the things, a seemingly good reputation. That doesn't mean that you're a good person. Crappy people can still own titles to big things in life. But Amie was different. Amie actually was a very good person. I personally had multiple things in common with the victim, Amie, and I couldn't help but think about many of you in the audience and your stories that you've brought to my attention, and so I'm confident that you will too. I personally recognize Amie Harwick in a lot of you. A native of Sellersville, Pennsylvania, Amie was briefly placed into foster care system as a minor and became the adoptive daughter of Penny and Tom Harwick. Now, I know some of you have been through that, been through the system, placed in foster care as a child, because that was me too. And it always seems to me that when we talk about adoption, that is the beginning of something great and the beginning of a whole new opportunity. But for most of us, it actually does not work that way at all. If you've been adopted, then you're unique in the sense that you come from two lives. You come from a totally previous life before the transition into the system happened, and then you have this whole entirely new life. Well, those of us that were in the system and dealt with multiple homes and transitioning, we kind of had to grow up a little bit faster than I feel we wanted to. Kids are actually designed to be dependents. That's why they're called dependents. They are designed to be dependents in their family on their parents. And so every time that we got moved around from one home to another and another, we lost what felt safe for us. And we had to really mold ourselves and adjust to change faster and earlier in life than we really were designed for. A lot of times what happens is that really tends to mold people into their adulthood later. That's gonna, catch up if you don't deal with what those feelings have done. And some people end up doing really well later in life for it, and some don't. What I came to admire greatly about Amie was she was one of those women that did amazingly well for herself, given the fact that she was a foster child and adopted into a family. In 2001, she moved to Los Angeles area and earned her undergraduate degree from Cal Poly and a Master of Arts in Clinical Psychology from Pepperdine University. She later earned a Doctorate of Human Sexuality from the now-defunct Institute for Advanced Study in Human Sexuality. She supported herself during her studies by working as a bartender, a dancer, and a performer. It is said that Amie had a fire, eating, dancing type of entertainment on the side, and everybody's like, dude, she was great at that. It's go Amie. She really did so well for herself. After working as a fitness instructor as well, she ended up becoming an LMFT, which stands for Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist, as she worked with clients coping with a range of conditions and situations including anxiety, depression, sexual exploitation, trauma, divorce, chronic pain, sex addiction, bipolar disorder, and DV. In 2014, she published The New Sex Bible for Women, a non-fiction guide for women seeking to improve their sexual lives. So I was able to check into this book, of course. First thing I had to do, nonfiction, sex ed. Yeah, I looked into it, and her writing style is literally the exact writing style that I will thumb through hundreds of books to find that exact writing style. The way she designs speaking and writing is almost like you are talking with a best friend over a cup of coffee or at brunch having a mimosa. She just literally reaches her audience with such love and gratitude. I highly suggest the purchase of this book. I'm going to leave the link down below where you can find it. She doesn't actually dive into being a female and talking just about sex like you would think. She actually starts with the motivation behind your character, the intent to take care of self. And believe it or not, if you're here watching about Amie's story, then you'll automatically have this in common with her because she was a true crime fanatic. She was a horror fanatic. She loved things of that nature. She was collecting taxidermy and many objects in formaldehyde jars. Allegedly, her ex-boyfriend, a healthier ex-boyfriend, turned her on to that. We love Amie. She's one of us. And I just feel like so much love for her because she was so full of life. She danced, she loved, she educated. When Amie was alive, she was alive. She had a spirit for living her best life. And that came to really drive home, furthermore, the sadness of realizing that Amie is no longer here when I read about just what an awesome individual she truly, truly was. And I'd like to bring awareness to the fact that if she was so amazing, how did somebody that was so unique, so smart, so driven, so in tune with education on mental awareness and helping other people, how would somebody like that end up in her position? Well, the answer is not only the weak and the frail get misused, is how we'll call it. Misused. In fact, people that misuse other people end up usually going for very powerful and very strong and extremely driven kind of victims. I've actually read a lot of different stories through the years about very powerful people, women that have lost everything, had the car, had the house, had the business, ran a company, something very successful in their lives, and literally lost it all at the hands of someone who misuses. So as powerful as Amie truly was, she was a human like the rest of us. And unfortunately, she fell victim at the hands of her ex-boyfriend. Amie started seeing a guy by the name of Gareth Pursehouse. Gareth was known to be a rather good-looking and charming guy who worked in photography and was a software engineer. Now, at first, Amie was pretty smitten over Gareth. At first everything was good, and friends allege this too. They're like, this guy and our friend Amie seemed to be very happy. But after the death of Amie would happen, that's kind of when friends looked back and they started noticing, oh, this probably started from the very beginning. They started to recognize that Gareth had entered Amie's life and that Amie had stopped coming around her friends and her family. And that's when her friends kind of knew, you know what? Amie wasn't really around us much at all. It always comes out later, doesn't it? I am certain if you're in the audience relating to this, then you already know that it's pretty typical to not see the bad happening during the grooming process until the bad is actually happening or it has happened. And that's when you kind of wonder, or friends will wonder, they go back to the beginning, and there's always signs in the beginning, far before something bad is about to happen. And the fact that Amie was so outgoing, social, extroverted, into helping people, this fact alone was really unusual for Amie. Research would show that there were numerous police reports that had happened between Gareth and Amie during the time of their relationship. Now, the relationship between Amie and Gareth was only about a year before she would end up needing to file a temporary restraining order against Gareth. Between 2010 and 2011, maybe it was even under a year, but it's like pushing around that per my research. But within that time, police were called numerous times. Honestly, I cannot imagine how mortified that left Amie feeling. I mean, you have a power woman that is helping other women, other people all over in the middle of Hollywood with status that she has worked like her whole adult life to earn for herself. And you got cops banging on your door because of your boyfriend and how he's treating you, how that must have affected her self-esteem. I can only imagine. Because it's almost like a double life. You're supposed to be someone that can help and the fix it and the answers. And on the other side of that line, while the doors are closed in your personal life, you have this going on. You got cops rolling into your driveway, the big blue and cherry lights flashing, and you're having to explain yourself and then turn around and put that mask back on and be the voice for everyone else. That is very upsetting to me. So by 2011, Allegedly, she had to file a temporary restraining order. This has been a little bit mixed up in the news, so I'm going to do my best to not get this twisted for you, but there ended up needing to be 2 restraining orders. Some news sources say that the restraining orders never went through, but that can't be true because by 2012, that's when the relationship officially ended. And so when I'm learning she was a alleged failure to appear and never actually followed through, and the relationship ended for good by 2012, that's telling me that maybe he convinced her at the time to drop it and they were going to try again, or maybe he came to her and had her convinced that he was going to change. All of this is to, come out in the trial, so we'll continue to find out. But by 2012, that is when she placed a second restraining order. And this time, it went through. Now, my restraining order that I had to place against my crazy ex in my life was for 2 years. Amie's was for 3 years. And I knew when I read 3 years before even seeing any evidence about what he had done to her, I already knew that relationship was very bad. The judicial system out here in California does not just approve all restraining orders. I have known people that get it granted, and I'm like, wow, that means whatever you are going through was really serious. And then I've known people that I think have a serious situation and they go here in California and try to file and they can't get it approved. And I know women that were like Amie that dropped the restraining order. And I feel in my heart that there are numerous people that are tried and tested by their abuser, their misuser, that will come along right before that happens and try to get the charges dropped, or just try to get a woman to not follow through on that because they're only thinking about themselves and they don't want to face the consequences. And this can happen to men and women, just so you know. But I'm basing the story off of my personal experience and Amie's experience, which were women, so I'm just talking from a woman's standpoint on the matter. But it can happen to anyone. Her restraining order was set from 2012 to 2015, 3 years. And when I looked at the evidence as to why she had this granted in the first place, I was able to completely understand. There are actual existent images in the police report of Amie totally tore up, unrecognizable. She's got like a thin nose. And in the pictures, her nose is swollen and she's been crying and there's blood. He knocked her around good and it shows. I'm going to allow you to kind of read here what she says he did so I can avoid utilizing big bad words on YouTube, but I want you to understand the message of just how bad this relationship was for Amie and why she had to place this restraining order. And it's been even said that he tried to push her out of a moving vehicle while she was on the freeway. Now, there's a difference between being a jerk and not wanting to be exposed in the court of law for something that you've done to someone else. It's a lot easier to groom and manipulate someone that has always bent to your control to try to get them to do what you want them to do if you're a misuser, as I'm calling it. The misuse of someone without saying the A word here. That's easier. But once the restraining order goes through, that for you means no contact. No contact is literally a no contact order, and it means exactly just that. You do not come for that person. You do not talk to that person. You do not leave love notes for that person. You do not dedicate music to that person. You don't send roses for that person. No contact. You do not go through a third-party friend and try to get them to send messages for you, because that is a violation of the order. In the order, it states very clearly all the people that are protected, all the parties, the distance that the individual needs to stay away from the victim, the reasoning why. It should have the statement of the victim and why it was approved. In the court of law, it will be approved if there is enough evidence to approve it. Well, Gareth did not handle the ending well, as most don't, but he took it a step further. He tried to violate the order numerous times. This, for Amie, was supposed to be the end. This was the closeout. 3 years to heal, to get on with her life, to get away from his misuse of her, all the bad things that he was trying to do. That is Amie's time. He did not care. For him, he was one of those. It was a piece of paper. It didn't matter. He starts going through other people to try to get Amie to come back to him, to break contact with him, probably to drop the order for him. And if you ask me, this was just his way to weasel his stupid ass back into her life and start using and abusing her again. It finally got to a point where a mutual friend of Amie's and Gareth told Gareth with a boundary, like, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. He was trying to help because he was friends amongst the two of them, but he realized this is going too far. I'm just getting used and pushed around by this guy. So he told Gareth no more. And that goes to show the kind of guy that Gareth was. The boundary that this guy set, and he wasn't even Amie, just the friend set on Gareth. Gareth was really mad. He said, you know what? Her or me, choose. And the friend's like, hey man, well, Gareth cut contact with the guy. So in a way, what I recognize is that Gareth took someone that drew a boundary that was probably going to end up cutting Gareth off soon. And being in the corner of Amie, Gareth tried to victimize himself when it didn't work and a boundary got drawn on Gareth. He ended up just cutting the friend off. He ended up using the guy and then just discarding the guy. Like nothing at all, because he didn't get his way with Amie. And that's when the friend kind of knew, okay, I think I know what Amie's been dealing with. Sometime 4 years down the line, after Amie and Gareth had, come to an end and Amie was moving on with her life, someone broke into Amie's home. And they ended up wiping her computer clean and destroying certain items. And she called up her best friend and she said, can you come check this out? And she automatically in her mind was like, I think I know who did it. I think Gareth did this. And there have been many different examples of Gareth and his crap, his cycle that he was utilizing on Amie, where he would break in her home and he would leave love notes, he would send songs, he would leave flowers, and then other times when he wasn't getting his way, he was breaking her stuff. He was being very disrespectful and violating Amie's life. And on top of it, for years, Amie had a horrible smear campaign based against her name in Los Angeles, against her career, her life, everything that she's ever worked hard for. As soon as that relationship ended, someone was online cyberbullying her and smearing her name, which is pretty typical for someone that, is a misuser. If that's your crazy ex and that person doesn't want to let go or they just want to come back with vengeance, that is in their way being a coward, but being able to come for you, to still ruin your life without owning the concept that it's me, I'm ruining your life. That's their way of coming back for you. And that's called a smear campaign. So Amie had one of those going on, and she always suspected not only that Gareth was the one that came in 4 years later and broke her stuff and wiped her computer out, but also that he was behind the big smear campaign movement against her online. Now, for years to come, Amie would end up not really wanting to talk about Gareth because that was a bad time in her life. She probably reflected after she regained her success, balanced her footing, got back on solid ground in her life again, regained herself, learned herself, upped her self-esteem, did the healing, did the work that most victims do. She only referred to Gareth as her stalker. That was it. She didn't like to remember. She didn't sit around and dwell. She didn't like to elaborate much. But when she did bring him up, it was very seldom, and he was nicknamed the stalker. And eventually, Amie would end up finding love once again. Amie would be at a Hollywood party in 2017 where she would meet and almost marry Drew Carey. Drew Carey is a comedian and a host on the show The Price is Right. And they had this love that Drew to this day says, I just loved her so much. They had romance, they had a bond, they just got along. They just got each other. He says they would just start dancing in the kitchen and that she was such an awesome person and he could see potential. He saw the best in who she was. Their first date was at Disneyland and he recalls, I went back to work and I told all my coworkers about this woman that I met and I was just on cloud 9, basically. Like she was something. Now, I'm not assuming that Amie wasn't ready for love when I say this, but the relationship would end up coming to an end because they had their differences too. She and him ended up needing to go to therapy and try to figure out how to love through these differences. But I have to wonder if part of that was maybe because Amie had a hard run with Gareth. I'm not saying it's on her, but I do know that when you come out of something bad and you have to start all over and you lost everything, including who you are as a person, and you go and find that person again, you're really protective. It's hard to let that wall down and not treat the next person like the previous person, because if you get burned again, you don't know this time what you're gonna do. Last time, you didn't see it coming and you figured it out. This time, if it happens again, that's not an option, in fact. You don't have a plan. Trauma permits us to guard ourselves whether we want it that way or not. We don't mean to be introverted, weird, timid, and afraid to love again, but sometimes that's just how it is. That's how it comes. The package is, this is me, and I'm a great person, but my history also has some kind of play into why I'm a stronger person for who I am today. And that's not always a pretty look, and it can be difficult to hold a relationship after something like what Amie went through has happened. And so they couldn't find the meet in the middle, those two, Drew and Amie. They ended up having to end the relationship. It was just for the better good. Other things that I've heard is that Drew's fame had kind of this negative play on the name of Amie. You see, again, if Amie is working very hard to rebuild herself back up and Drew has fame and he has a status, then sometimes you can be living on the shadow of someone else. And that's not a good feeling either. That's not really doing what you've set yourself out to do, especially with all the credentials and the way that Amie was. She wanted to be the best and she worked hard at that every day. And so Drew would come out to say, you know, that was really hard on our relationship. And she told me, I really wish you weren't famous. God, this sucks. And they said that the breakup hurt them both, but it was amicable. So there was no issue. It was just like, probably compared to Gareth, the easiest thing in the world. She's used to somebody holding on tight. Drew, he was just like, okay. She ended up, you know, moving on with her life. But after you've come out of something really toxic and horrifically bad, and you find someone that has your best interest at heart, you don't forget them. You don't forget the supporters. You don't forget the people that were there to love you at your times of learning and growing during the growing pains. Those people you hold very dearly in your heart. And even if you lose touch, you don't forget. So she never forgot Drew. And I guess he never forgot her either, because he says that she reached out February 13th of 2020 and she said, I know that we had our differences, but I'd really like to meet with you and just talk. And of course, Drew remembered just the best in her and he was smitten. He was excited and he said, yeah, oh my God, I want to meet with you too. Oh, I love you. And he just felt his heart skip a beat all over again. And he was so excited that he was going to see Amie again. But unfortunately, he would never see Amie again, and that would be their very final conversation. Now, in January of 2020, it had been about 9 years since Amie and Gareth had ended things between each other. And I feel like she never really forgot, and that she always had kind of eyes in the back of her head for this guy. I mean, like I said, it was never just a clean cut. Somebody had broken into her home. She had been harassed through a third party. She dealt with the rumors online. So in a way, in my opinion, that was Gareth's way of never really letting Amie go. She ends up going to a Hollywood show for the adult film industry where she was invited to come basically walk the red carpet. And guess who is there working as a photographer? Gareth. And just like you would see in a movie on Lifetime, or maybe some kind of Netflix documentary, or maybe some kind of horror show, Gareth did what you would only think maybe a scriptwriter would do. He really did this. He walked up to Amie and he's like, yo! He stomps over to her and he's like, you effing B, you ruined my life. And he starts getting on her face, hissing at her, freaking out on her. There's like 100 people around and Amie's just like he's hissing and she's like, oh my, what? She didn't think that he was this hung up on her. And so Amie had to go what's called, therapy mode. She's like, hey, shh, take it easy. All right, you know what? Calm down. She's looking around. She goes, it's okay, Gareth. And he allegedly ended up falling to the ground and throwing a tantrum and fully crying, reciting to her text messages from their relationship like 9 years earlier. He's like, I lost my job. You're the worst. You hurt me so bad. And Amie is horrified. It was said that she ended up having to take him to the side, close to security guards, right? She takes him to the side and she gives him like a free therapy session. She's like, hey, okay, I hear you, I understand. It's time to let go. There's no differences between us. She's soothing him, trying to talk him through this time. This right here is a telltale sign behind why we think Gareth is behind her murder. Put away the evidence for a second. Physical evidence and his mental well-being are like two different things. Let's talk about where Gareth was, where Amie must have been in their mindset. So even though Amie was startled by the behavior of Gareth, it scared her, right? Like that was her startle. It wasn't, oh, I didn't see that coming, as much as it was, wow, I can't believe that he did this kind of again. The way that Amie handled herself with the free therapy session and coping with that with a very soft side to herself, instead of like, hey, security, or calling the cops. And instead of going that route, she decided she was going to handle it herself. I think that Amie was prepared for this the way that she handled it, which means that she was prepared to redirect and de-escalate him back to a place where he could think and cope. I think she was prepared, which means he is indefinitely absolutely crazy. His response and her response tell me who was playing what role back between 2010 and 2012. I can see clearly who was the perpetrator in their relationship. I wanted to acknowledge this post that was on her page after the relationship with Gareth. It says, stop. It's an intrusive thought. It will pass. You are safe. In her description, she talks about intrusive thoughts that can be symptoms of depression, anxiety, and trauma. She says to remember that your thoughts are like an inside job, that your thoughts will pass, and then she tells you to give yourself a replacement thought in knowing that you're safe and it's just a thought. Well, I thought that spoke volume about her healing and the direction she was giving her audience or social media, the way that she handled Gareth. To me, I am certain in reading that she's teaching about this and knowing how to handle it, that she had to do this and has had to face her own intrusive thoughts with Gareth probably for years. Like, what if he breaks in my home? What if we run into each other? I mean, do you really think that she didn't think this through in her head and decided to replace seeing him have control over her and be prepared with a better thought and a better plan of action to say, if I see him and he flipped on me, I would be ready. I would talk to him this way. This is what I would say, to know that she was actually safe. Because that's what she's expressing you ought to do. And that's what I saw that she personally did. I saw her take an intrusive thought, twist it into something positive to make herself safe, and have to actually live the nightmare in real life and replace it with something better. Because that's all her friends said in the surrounding peers. They were like really amazed that she was able to have self-control under the circumstances. If you weren't mentally prepared for that, you would probably act very differently. Afraid, run, call someone, scream back, argue, debate, say, you were in my life. But she didn't do any of that. She was prepared, I'm telling you. And sadly, Amie would stay prepared despite how this all ends. She would stay prepared. Amie would end up writing herself an email that expressed that she was afraid and knew that he wasn't well because he was still obsessed with her in the way that his approach to her went. It was probably like she spent many years in the field, maybe digesting this, maybe even talking with a therapist of her own on it. She was able to identify that his behavior was dangerous before his behavior would get dangerous. And on February 14th of 2020, this would be Amie's final day of life. She would wake up that day. Cleopatra one of her best friends was coming over. And she said, I'm gonna wear a red sweater on our hike today because it's Valentine's Day. She seemed like she was kind of in a hurry, a little bit winded that morning, but she had a lot going on. You see, she had plans. After Cleopatra and Amie hiked together around the Hollywood Hills, they went to a quaint little breakfast cafe where she talked about how she intended to spend the rest of her day and her evening for Valentine's Day. She and a group of people were gonna go to the show Burlesque. And she was very, very excited about that. She was wearing a rosary necklace, her leather jacket, her purse, and her boots, and a velvet dress. Amie was said to be just a very bright light at the show. She was dancing, they were singing, they were having a blast. She ended up getting invited by one of the main entertainers of the burlesque show. She's like, hey, Amie, come with us to the after party. And Amie said, no, you know what? I'm just gonna go have some tea with my girls. I'll see you later. Hey, I love you. And that was the last time her friend at the burlesque show would end up ever speaking to her again. Where the girls went to hang out next was going into the wee hours of February 15th. There were pictures taken on a green couch. Around 1 a.m., Amie ended up texting her friend. She's like, hey, send me those pictures from the green couch. Now, Amie did not live alone. She had a roommate, and the roommate was on the first floor. Amie's bedroom was up on the third floor. So the roommate said that he heard some kind of strange, weird, loud noise earlier in the night after he had already been to bed. But Amie was at the burlesque show. And so he thought that that was the noise of Amie coming into the house. And he said he put himself back to sleep. But now we know that there was a really good chance that someone, most likely Gareth, had broken in to Amie's home and was waiting for her while the roommate was sleeping. Oh my God, talk about terrifying. Literally, after Amie sent that text to her friend about the green couch, her roommate downstairs ends up hearing her scream. He knows something's wrong. He is very alarmed. He jumps out of bed and he starts scrambling and he's looking for his phone. All the while, Amie's upstairs screaming. He thinks he hears muffling, which sounds like somebody's got their hand pressed over her mouth. He knows something's wrong. He can't find his phone. So he's like, hey! He starts screaming. He tells whoever's up there, stop! Because he doesn't know if they know he's home. So he ends up running out of the house. He runs to the neighbors. He's banging on doors. It said that somebody was up the road and happened to have a cell phone. So he hollered and they lent him the phone and he called the police. And this happened by 1:14 a.m. When police arrived to the house, they found that Amie was by a rose bush on the ground and had been tossed over the balcony 3 stories above. 3-story fall is a hell of a fall. Amie was barely alive. She was hanging on for dear life. She wasn't breathing very well. She was rushed to the hospital, where at 3 a.m. she was pronounced deceased. But the medical examiner would say this was a homicide. This wasn't just someone that fell off the 3rd floor. Amie had signs of strangulation and had fought for her life. It was determined that she fought for her life for 6 minutes. And while 6 minutes seems like not a lot of time, every second that goes into 30 seconds up to a minute and up to 6 minutes is a very long time to fight for your life. That probably seemed like an eternity. During the investigation, the home showed that there was definitely a fight that Amie fought back, including blood on the bedroom door, and the trail of beads from the rosary necklace she was wearing that night going from her TV room through her bedroom and onto the balcony. So of course, there's a tragedy. Something's happened. Someone has died, and there has definitely been a homicide that happened in Amie's home that early morning. So friends and family start getting the call. Right away, they know who it is. Gareth. Now, one of her best friends was asked, do you know if Amie considered having a additional restraining order placed on Gareth after the scene that he caused on the red carpet back in January of 2020, the month that he ran into her? And the answer was she did. She considered it, but it's hard to get a restraining order. It doesn't just come that easy. Having a scene thrown at you like that, where things are just verbal, that would be difficult to pass a restraining order. And so Amie didn't do it, because she didn't think that it was necessary. It's unfortunate to think if she had, she might have not been protected anyway. Her friend from the burlesque show that invited Amie then said, you know what? Hey, come to the after party. She beats herself up. She thinks that if Amie had spent time with them at the after party, that there's a chance that this guy might have just not done this at all. She thinks there's some way that she might have been able to help. And that's a hard feeling to live with. I beg to differ, and here's why. He was not going to let go. It had already been 9 years. He probably had her on his radar more than she realized, more than breaking in her home 4 years after the breakup and the restraining order, more than the restraining order, more than the smear campaign. I don't think this guy ever let go. I don't think that he wanted Amie to live without him. Another symptom of somebody that is like mentally unwell is identity crisis. And check this out. I literally thought this guy was the lawyer. He doesn't look anything like he did 9 years ago. He has changed. He's got fat. He's fat. He looks like he didn't take care of himself at all. He obviously is self-projecting onto Amie by saying, you ruined my life. Well, can you hold on the burger and fries? Was that Amie's fault too? It's crazy. It's crazy the distance these people will go to make this your fault. Amie looked better than ever at that show in 2020, and I'm sure that probably pissed him off because he looked like dog shit. After the arrest, Gareth Pursehouse was initially released on a $2 million bond, but he was taken into custody again a few days later on a no-bail warrant. He has remained in Los Angeles County Jail awaiting trial. $2 million? I want to know how that worked. How did that work? Somebody comment in the section down below. Bear with me here. Did they put a lien on a house? Like, did somebody that he knew have $2 million in the bank? When he was turned around and arrested again, did they give the money back? Did they take the lien off? Like, how does this work? Somebody let me know, because $2 million is a lot. And that goes to show that he really thought that he was above the law. I'll be honest with you. If I had $2 million in the bank and I was sitting in jail, even for a crime I didn't commit, I'd just maybe wait that out. I might just try to enjoy the outside gym, the food maybe. Maybe the free TV time they allegedly get. I don't know. I don't think I could ever justify $2 million. I don't know why. Even for my freedom, that's a lot of money. Now, outside on the balcony space, there was a syringe that was found, and it had a lethal dose of nicotine in it. And I'm telling you, you learn something new every day. I didn't even know that was a thing. People smoke themselves to death. People vape, they smoke, they chew. I didn't know that there was a lethal amount of nicotine. So there you go. If you didn't know, you're not alone. I had no idea. And what was weird was that Amie didn't smoke. She didn't use nicotine products. So obviously this was definitely brought by the perpetrator. Now, Gareth has pled not guilty. His defense would say that he did not kill her and there's enough evidence to back that. But they are saying if he was at the house, then there's a chance that he was bringing the syringe to end his life, because they allege that by the time that Gareth ran into Amie, that he was in a dark, depressive time in his life. So at worst, they're saying worst case scenario, she fell, he brought the syringe to kill himself, and that he would have just been there to have a conversation. Please. Text messages between Gareth and Amie would indicate that Gareth was threatening her and saying, you know what, things are just going to get a whole lot worse for you. Amie was trying really hard to calm him down. Seemed like a lot. She was telling him like, hey, we don't have to go down this road. We can be amicable. We can stay civil from a distance and still both move on, and we can both be happy. Now, it's said that 4 years after the breakup with Gareth, when whoever broke in and wiped her computer and destroyed her stuff, the reason why that was never caught was because they didn't have cameras. The night that Gareth broke into the house, if it's him, we'll just say the attacker, I guess. I feel like I know who it is, but okay. The attacker. When that person broke into the home, they messed with the cameras. So that was a big telltale sign that they didn't want to get caught. And also the fact that 1:11 a.m., it was shown that the perpetrator was running out of the house minutes after Amie was screaming. Now the trial is actually happening as of now, and I'll go ahead and keep up with that, but I would like to know what your thoughts are. What are you thinking? It sure does sound like he is guilty of killing Amie. And Drew, her ex, would come out to remember her as just a wonderful person, and all the friends of Amie are just devastated. It was a huge loss, admittedly, and I feel that loss. I really connected with this case. Have you been in this situation before? Do you guys understand the seriousness of a restraining order? And do you know your rights? Do you know in your state what your rights are? Do you understand that a misuser, the perpetrator, if you're the victim, will look at this like maybe just a piece of paper and break it and violate it the way they broke you and violated you? Are you aware of that, and are you prepared for that? Are you going to practice what Amie most likely practiced in her mind? Are you going to let these intrusive thoughts dictate how you live the rest of your life and remain afraid and feel held back? Are you going to replace the intrusive thought with a game plan? Get your life together. Pull yourself back up, strap your boots up, and carry on like the phoenix that you are and you can be. Don't ever let what a broken, mentally ill, crappy person did to you. Don't ever let that dictate how you're gonna live the rest of your life. And know that you're worthy and so very loved. And there are a lot of ways that you can get support. Trust me, I have been there and I understand. And some of you guys have been there tenfold past my personal experience. So are you aware of what you can do and what your rights are? Thank you so much for tuning in. Check the story out. I'll leave some resources down below. I'm Chelsea J. Also, don't forget to utilize Chelsea J20 for your 20% off of Ana Luisa jewelry today. The link is also down below. Take care, fam. See you next week for another video. Crime let out.